So in England, there's a place called Brickburn Priory. And right next to the priory, there is a lush green hill that is nowadays surrounded by a fence. Well, there are stories about this hill, and one of the most popular is that a long, long time ago there was a prior at the priory who got offended by the behavior of a hunter, and he condemned that hunter to lie asleep beneath the hill until the end of time. This story was passed down from generation to generation, and of course there was never any evidence it was true, except for once. There was once a shepherd who was grazing his flock on the hill beside the priory, as he did all the time. But today, as he wandered over the hill, he felt the ground shift beneath his feet, which had never happened before, and he looked down and he realized that there was now a door in the side of the hill, an ordinary wooden door with a handle. And so he went over to the door and he tried the handle and he pulled the door open and looked in, and there he saw a tunnel leading into the hill. So the shepherd, who was an adventurous sort, called his hound, and off he went into the hill, groping his way through the darkness. And he walked quite a long ways into the hill until he came to a barrier that also felt like a wooden door. And he felt over this door until he found another handle, and then he pulled the handle and opened up the door, and light flooded into the passage, as much light as if he'd come out into the world again. His eyes were all screwed up from the darkness, but eventually they adjusted, and he realized that he was in a room. It wasn't a big room, but it was a very bright room, and there wasn't much in it, but there was a table, and at the table was sitting, fast asleep, a man in the garb of a hunter. And the man was just slumped over with his face resting on his hand, and otherwise the shepherd could see him breathing, but that was all. And a little ways away from the table there was another man lying on the ground, surrounded by hounds who were also asleep. And the shepherd looked around the room and he realized that on the table beside the hunter were two things, a horn and a sword in a sheath. So the shepherd went over to the table and he picked up the horn and he raised it to his lips, and he was about to blow into it when he realized that the hunter was moving a little bit and stirring as if he was about to wake up. So the shepherd took the horn and put it back on the table. But then he picked up the sword and he began to pull it out of the sheath. And as he did so, the hunter stirred, and so did the other man, and the hounds began to stir as well. And he heard angry noises coming from all of them. So the shepherd took the sword and he put it back on the table. In the meantime, he could hear behind him an ominous creaking noise, as if the door were beginning to swing shut. And the shepherd turned around and realized that in fact the door was closing. So he called his hound again and he nipped back out into the passage just before the door slammed closed. And the shepherd fled up the passage with a voice behind him screaming imprecations at him, condemning him for his behavior in the room. Ahead of him, the shepherd could see the door out into the world, but that door too was beginning to close. The light was dimming, and the shepherd put on a burst of speed, and he ran until he reached the door just before it closed, and he again nipped right out into the outside, and the door slammed shut, the shepherd having escaped by the skin of his teeth. However, his hound was not so lucky. His hound managed to get its head and its paws out into the world before the door slammed, and the door nipped the hound in two. Well, the shepherd did not go back to that hill again, and in fact, people tended to steer clear of it. Some adventurous types have looked for the door into the hill again, but since that day, no one has ever found it.